Small and medium-sized businesses are the backbone of our economy.
Hey, welcome to the Backbone Small Business Podcast. This is number 2 in our 3-part mini-series of the NKPG Task Force, and that's Norgaard Kratofil Professional Group. And today we've got Shantelle Logan, an accountant. She's a CPA, and she's with us, and we're going to chat about, during this COVID-19 crisis, some wage subsidies. Hey, Chantal, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. So we are going to try and do a little bit of a screen share in a bit. Maybe, you'd want to talk to a couple of things. I know that one of the first programs the government announced, and certainly was one of the first things I touched on with our first podcast, was a 10% wage subsidy. And now we've also heard about a 75% wage subsidy. Where are we at? Is it one or the other? Is it both? Maybe you can fill us in.
There are actually, both are available. The eligibility criteria is a little bit different. At first, we had thought that when the 75% was announced that it was replacing the 10%, but it's actually not. It is, both are available, but you can't stack them up. So for instance, if a corporation or an individual is eligible for both, they don't get to add them together and make an 85% subsidy.
Okay.
But yes, both are available for businesses who are eligible for each.
Is there anything you can do? So what businesses would be eligible for, say, the 10%? Which one are they targeting there?
So the 10% really is for smaller businesses. It's for those eligible for the small business deduction, which is usually available to businesses operating in Canada who have less than, it's usually $10 million in what we call taxable capital. So if a business doesn't have millions of dollars of assets and it does business in Canada, it's owned by Canadians, then it's probably eligible. If anybody had any questions about that, they should talk to their accountant. But generally, a lot of small mom and pop shops, they'll all be eligible for this 10% subsidy.
Okay, so then why would somebody? So what's the difference then between the 10 and the 75 in terms of, if I'm going to apply for 10, why wouldn't I apply for 75?
Now, if you're eligible for both, you can absolutely apply for both. How it would work is if a business is eligible for both, then when they go to apply for the 75%, when the government looks at the remuneration that you've paid your employees, if you've had a 10% rebate in the payroll deduction taxes, which is how the 10% is received, then the amount you've effectively paid your employees or paid for wages is less. And that amount will be subtracted from the 75% that you can be eligible for. So it'll reduce the amount of what you've paid your employees and CRA for the 75%.
So now with the 75%, how does that manifest? Because when I first heard about this, I thought, wow, what I did because I'm a pretty small business, I laid off my employees because I wanted them to get in line first for any EI that they may have been eligible for, or for which they may have been eligible. So that's what we did. So we had no staff, and then literally the bottom fell out of our business, like most other small businesses. So I don't have any need for staff. But if I did have staff, the 75% is the government, how does it manifest? Is the government writing us a check? If my payroll's $10,000, are they sending me a check for $7,500, or does it offset against payroll source deductions down the road? How does that work?
So the 10% we know is going to be a reduction of the payroll remittance, and that's available for remittances that are due in the month of April for March. The 75%, they haven't actually announced that I've seen how that's going to manifest, but it sounds like it's probably going to be a reimbursement to the company in the form of a check maybe some tax credits. But I think they want businesses to be able to keep their workers. So I anticipate that it's going to be a check that's received. Businesses have to apply online through either my business account or another web-based portal that the government is currently developing. I think we're going to see that next week. So the 10% is something that you can get almost immediately now as soon as your remittances are due. But the 75% might take some time. Businesses have to apply for it. They have to show they're eligible for it, provide some documentation. That application will need to be reviewed. And so effectively, it might take longer to get the check for the 75%. Of course, it
still
is
sounds
bigger.
like, you know, the projections sound like what you're saying is that it's a pay for and apply for reimbursement situation.
That's what it sounds like it's going to be. You have to show, the government has said that you have to show that you've paid your workers in order to get reimbursed for it. And they're hoping the businesses are going to be able to pay their workers 100% and pay that extra 25% that's not going to be reimbursed. But it sounds like that's not going to be a make or break situation. Businesses have to try, and I think that when they make that application, they're going to have to attest that they're going to try and make that top up as their cash flow allows. But if businesses can't, I don't think that strikes them from the eligibility. But you do have to be out of pocket those salaries in order to get reimbursed. That's what it sounds like.
When we I mean, it sounds like all the details haven't been worked. Well, they certainly haven't all been worked out, but I get a clearer picture now. Now, you were showing me before we hit record a couple websites. Could you share your screen with us? And
absolutely. So there's a few websites that are really good. I encourage people to look at government sources when they can. But what we've got here, this first link, this is the temporary wage subsidy for employers. So this is a really handy tool on who's eligible for the 10% and how to calculate it. This is a really good comprehensive guide on how to calculate that 10%. And of course, there's the added bonus that if a business is using QuickBooks as their application, further down on the screen, it'll actually explain to you how to enter this into your bookkeeping software. So that's just an added bonus.
Okay, that sounds good. And now, you know, if you're a Luddite accounting wise like myself, the best thing to do is pick up the phone and call NKPG or call
absolutely
accounting firm if we're in
yes, we're here to help. And I know that there's so many accountants throughout the city that are working really hard to give businesses support and provide them with everything they need to get through this really difficult time. But if businesses want to keep costs down, they want to try and do it themselves, there's also questions here, this frequently asked questions from the Government of Canada CRA website. It has
sorry, just to be clear, you're right on there, canada.ca, Revenue Canada, wage subsidy. So if we did a Google for that, I mean, people can obviously see it, but then we could do a search for it. Yeah.
Yes. So I should backtrack. If you want to find the QuickBooks one, the URL was really long. If you Google 10% wage subsidy QuickBooks, it's the first link that comes up. If you Google 10% wage subsidy, I think it just period, this should be one of the first things that come up. And I specifically look for the Government of Canada website. They have done a pretty good job about explaining everything, but there are some terms in there that are a little more technical. So if people do have questions, I would encourage them to ask their accountant if they have questions about their eligibility or any of the technical jargon that is in here. There is a little bit, but in general, it's fairly understandable.
You've got two tabs up there. One is a Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, and the one you're on right now. Is it just one that the questions based on the other one then?
Yeah, so this temporary wage subsidy, that's the 10% one. Okay. And this other tab here, this is the 75%. So this is the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. Rather than being on CRA's website, it's on the Department of Finance website, still through the Government of Canada. And this goes through the 75%, how you would calculate your revenue reduction, because you're supposed to see a revenue reduction of 30% to be eligible for this. And they answer questions such as, what do I do if my business wasn't even operating 12 months ago and I don't have comparison to show the government what that 30% reduction would look like, because generally you're comparing March to March and April to April's revenue. Each time you do have to apply for this each month. And it goes over who's eligible, the amount of the subsidy, how it's calculated. Another thing in here that's really good to note here, a special rule will apply to employees that do not deal at arm's length with their employer. So that means if you own a business and you're an employee of that business, you're not dealing at arm's length because you own the business, you control it in a sense. So this talks about that some special rules will deal with that, but what it sounds like here is if you're an owner who owns your own business, you will be eligible for the 75% subsidy, but you can't give yourself a raise.
No, come on now. That takes all the fun out of it.
Well, that being said, I think they're trying to create some fairness in this. So you need to give yourself the same wage that you were giving yourself before this current crisis. You can't up it, unfortunately.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. That's a great. I mean, it looks like a lot of reading for sure. A little light reading on a.
It is a lot of reading, and it goes through really nicely. But there's a lot of accounting firms like NKPG who have put out memos to our clients where we try and take this and condense it to what businesses absolutely need to know. Take out some of the details so it's a little bit less overwhelming.
Yeah, and
it is quite a bit of reading.
Yeah, well, I mean, this program, it seems to me that it does make, there's less questions raised around this program, because I was speaking with Norgaard Kratofil in our previous episode about, should a company actually, or how does a company evaluate whether you actually want to go into debt for this or not? Because you're going to have to pay at the end of the day. We're going to have to pay, all of us as small business owners. But this is something that's different. This is actually immediately helpful.
Yes, it is, especially the 10%, and then the 75% should hopefully come soon. I think after an application is accepted, it would take about the same 5 to 10 business days for businesses to start receiving money. But of course, we're not sure yet how long the application will take, as the application process hasn't even started yet. It's not going to be open until I believe next week or possibly the week after. So the second week of April, possibly the 3rd.
Okay. All right. I think on that note, Shantelle, unless is there anything else you can think of relating to wage subsidies during this COVID-19 through the Canadian government?
I would also just tell people that if they're wanting to do the 75% wage subsidy, they'll need to have a few documents on hand before they go to apply. They'll need to be able to demonstrate and have records showing their reduction in revenue, and they'll have to provide records about how much they have paid their employees. So that will be important to have on hand.
T4 summary from last year, right?
Possibly, or we might see pay stubs from the eligible period. You might have to provide those. It's possible that they could ask for canceled checks or bank statements showing that those checks were cashed.
And in terms of reduction of revenue, is it at this point, because it's going to be unaudited financial statements clearly, point of sale system receipts?
That's quite possible, or it just might be informal bookkeeping. And I think the compliance will come later. where the government will come after this is all finished and things have settled down again. They're going to come back and check that people were, being
Not
honest
committing
about
fraud.
what they're experiencing.
That's going to be a huge ordeal is people not committing fraud through this whole process.
Yes, so that's the government is introducing possibly some new criminal legislation that's going to deal with people who do take advantage of this system. That can be, it might be fines, they've said, reimbursements to the government, but it might also, for people who are more majorly fraudulent in this system, that might actually include jail time. Now, that would be intentional misconduct. I would expect not, oops, I didn't understand some of the technical jargon that was in the application, or I didn't fully understand things and I made a small, reasonable error.
Yeah, understood. I mean, they're the tax collector, the debtor with the strongest teeth in this country anyway. So I mean, it makes sense. They're not just going to blank write checks and forget about it. There's going to be I've been impressed with, regardless of political stripe, I've been impressed with how the government has dealt with this in terms of helping ensure that Canadians can keep a roof over their head, food on their table. And this is the next step so that small businesses can keep going so that we can in turn ramp back up. Because once a couple months, goes by, it's not just all of a sudden going to be 100% business. It's going to have to be ramped back up again.
Yes, so I really think they're just trying to get money and help out the door right away, and compliance will come after, but it will come.
I know it will come, and so do you. Thank you, Shantelle. I appreciate
you're
it.
welcome.
Any questions, they can reach out to you at NKPG, or as I said, if small business, in Nepean or Sault Ste. Marie or Leduc, they've got their own accountant. Best to reach out to their own accountant and make sure that they're compliant with these things, because they certainly, once this is all said and done, they don't want to be in trouble a year down the road.
No, it is really beneficial to contact your accountant at this time. Of course, if you don't have one, NKPG is happy to help. We're always trying to provide the best service to our clients so that they can get everything they need that's possible to get through this time.
Thank you, Chantal. I appreciate it. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Ciao.
Bye.
Okay, so we're back with Chantal, and you're not seeing things. Clothes are different space. My grandfather's boat that he handmade, and the reason why is because this is now a day later, or actually 2 days later, and the government has changed some of the policies on the programs for the employees, of which we were speaking a couple days ago. And Shantelle Logan is here from the NKPG task force. Shantelle, how you doing? And can you speak to that, please?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me again. Yes, some exciting new updates were announced by Trudeau this morning. There was a loosening of the requirements for the 75% emergency wage subsidy. It went from a 30% requirement in the reduction of revenue. Now we're saying just for the month of March, they're going to reduce that to 15%. And the way that they're going to have businesses show that reduction has been updated a little bit too. It's going to be, instead of comparing March 2020 to March 2019, I believe you can still do that, but for new businesses who are rapidly growing, they were hearing a lot of concerns about that's not going to be a good way for us to measure things, or that's not going to help because our business has grown so much in the past year. So they're going to make it where you can compare March numbers to January and February to show that reduction instead of going back 12 months.
That's good. So it gives the business owner the opportunity to highlight whatever appropriate business cycle they might be experiencing. Because I know for our business, January, February traditionally not great months, but March is. So I know I just looked at our numbers, and because of the hotel closure and whatnot, we're down 79%. So that's clearly a lot more than the 15%, but that's good. They've dropped it from a 30% threshold to a 15% threshold.
Yes.
And,
Yeah,
and
that's
how,
very
and
exciting.
that's something that employers have to prove prior to receiving the influx, or that's, how does that work?
They haven't released the full details, but they have said that people are going to be required to prove a reduction in revenue, and that they've paid out at least 75% of the wages that would be reimbursed. They're hoping that businesses will be able to top up the 25%, but they know that that might not be able to happen in all cases. But I think businesses are going to have to say that they're going to do their best to top up the 25%. And the government is likely going to ask for some records at some point, how much they'll ask for before with the original application or afterwards as part of a subsequent compliance process isn't quite clear yet. But I do think it'll probably be some records will need to be provided right when the application is submitted, which actually has to happen monthly.
Yeah, that's good information. So it's sort of a pay and apply for reimbursement, which is what we had spoken of a couple of days ago. So I think at this stage, why don't we leave it here? And clearly this is an evolving situation. So we'll check back in with you should there be changes.
There was one other update today too,
sure,
actually, though,
yeah.
if you want to talk about that. There was there was an update hoping to help students because, of course, students, a lot of them work throughout the summer to be able to afford tuition. And they want businesses to still be able to employ students. So there's a Canada Jobs program. I believe applications employers make to be part of the program are already shut down. But for those who've already made the applications, the government is saying that they can receive up to a 100% subsidy of the cost of hiring students. They're also hoping that this is going to help grocery stores or food banks hire students to be able to help deliver to people in need the groceries and the essentials, those types of things. And I believe it's for the first time students will be allowed to be hired in this program under a part-time basis instead of having to have full-time hours.
Okay, so now if I'm hiring a student, then I submit preemptively and say I'm planning on hiring, or is it going to be a pay and then apply for reimbursement again?
Usually to be part of this program, you do have to have already signed up, being approved to hire a student to have what was before a partial wage subsidy for them. And those applications actually did close in February. So it's not as helpful for people who go, oh, I would have liked to hire a student and get the 100% wage subsidy, but applications are not closed. But for businesses who normally hire students and are a part of this program every year, they will now be able to be eligible to possibly receive a 100% subsidy.
Okay, so that's two positive updates to government programs. And I know I was speaking with Daryl, one of your coworkers, yesterday, and he was speaking to the loan programs and the speed with which the government is moving, and how much, or how he would appreciate it if how he suggested they could move a little more quickly to get that money in the hands of the businesses that need it. And all those programs aren't even really up and running fully at this stage of the game. So I think with you, we'll stick with the staffing and the employment. Is there anything else that's happening that we need to know about?
I think those were the two big announcements that were made today. I mean, we might see more coming down the pipe if there's more feedback from businesses. It does sound like the government is trying to hear businesses and respond to deficiencies in what they've already announced. So if there's a big enough response back to them about certain issues, then I think we'll see further adjustments coming possibly.
Yeah, and obviously we're hoping that this plays some role in it. We're going to send this up the line. I appreciate that, Shantelle, and let's stay in touch, okay?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care. We'll see you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.